Welcome to episode 402 of the DFO Rundown. As always, brought to you by Bet365. It's never ordinary. Get in the game at Bet365 and use promo code NATION, NATION. I'm Jason Gregor. As we wrap up, we're officially still in the offseason for the NHL as training camps don't officially get going until Wednesday and then on ice on Thursday. And Mike Russo, of course, joins us once again on the rundown, rubbing it in our face that he was in Hawaii recently with his pineapple shirt. Mikey, how you doing, man?
Yeah, not the smartest fashion choice for something that had to be seen. It looks better in person, I promise you, than it does over here. Maybe
were you wearing that when you were in Vegas here last week in the NHL tour?
I probably was. I have trust me, I'm not as. I was talking to Celebrini about this in Vegas. I'm not exactly a fashionista, and so I have a small little rotation of clothes. So I probably was stupid enough to wear this in front of him.
Now, hey, we're going to get into a few things today. Of course, it's our final off season. We've previewed 3 of the 4 divisions. We're stopping in the Metro today, so it's kind of good timing with the Rangers news. But we'll get to that in a sec. But at the NHL tour, of course, lots of the big name guys were there. You were obviously in the Europe one, but some of the bigger name guys locally, all the American teams, Canadian teams, sending over guys. Anything stand out to you in some of your conversations with players?
No, you know who, by the way, was the one team that didn't send anybody? The Edmonton Oilers.
No, oh, really? They didn't send anybody.
Yeah. No, it was bizarre. But no, obviously, Eichel and Kempe were 2 of the bigger name guys there that we talked about their contract situations. I think, Eichel is really motivated to try to get a deal done with Vegas pretty soon. They were slow playing it at the time. We'll see if the news that Kirill Kaprizov turned a $60 million deal suddenly makes Kelly McCrimmon maybe I better get this thing done. Kempe seemed to, sort of want to wait. Right now, there hadn't been, at least as of last week, a lot of conversations with the LA Kings. The Hughes brothers made a lot of news. Jack was very open about wanting to play with Quinn at some point, and Quinn definitely didn't back down from it. Basically said, what is Jack supposed to do or say? If you had brothers, you'd say the same thing. But I think that the other thing that Quinn made it extremely clear, Jason, is that, look, this is a big year for the Vancouver Canucks. And if things go awry here, we'll see where this goes with his future. But I think it's very clear that those guys at some point want to play together, and it's Jack that's on the long-term deal. And then obviously Sidney Crosby, his agent talked to, Pierre LeBrun, Pat Brisson, and made it extremely clear too that at some point here, if Sid wants to win, and at some point here, if the Penguins don't win, maybe they have to entertain something else. Sidney has tried to put those fires out here the last week, made it extremely clear yesterday how much he loves Pittsburgh. But I think that this story is one of those ones that's not going to go away if the Penguins stink this season, which I think a lot of us think that they will.
Yeah, 2 things can happen at the same time. Crosby could love Pittsburgh, but also want to be on a team that's competitive. And right now, that doesn't look like it's plausible. And we'll get into the Penguins a little bit later in our Metro preview. The Hughes brothers one's interesting. Of course, brothers want to play together. Doesn't mean you can. Luke Hughes doesn't even have a contract yet. So, he's trying to figure out what will happen there. And, in the salary cap era, to get 3 brothers on one team, never mind 2, is tough enough. So, never mind 3, try to get 2 on the same team. There's lots of brothers who don't get to play together, for years. So, I wasn't too surprised by that. I thought Jack just answered the question honestly. He's like, yeah, of course I want to play with my brother. Who wouldn't? So, I'm sure there's guys, if you ask
the funniest thing is how he did it. So Pierre asked the question and he goes, this is the big headline question. And he just went for it. This was not somebody that was taken out of context or didn't know what he was doing. He knew he was making headlines.
Yeah, and that's okay. I don't mind that. We clamor for guys to say something. Then when someone says something, everyone's like, oh, I can't believe he said it. I'm like, well, what are we doing here? Let him speak his mind. He was honest. I do agree wholeheartedly, though. It's a huge season for the Canucks, and they've got to try to get things back on track there. New coach, there's all the internal drama of Pettersson, Miller. That's not an excuse anymore. Can they score some goals? Demko's health, that'll be a big one. Now, the Kaprizov one, Mike, because on the last rundown, you had said, hey, I've heard that, they're going to offer him $128 million, which is 16 over 8 years. And they did. Now, I think term is more the issue, or not AAV. Is that what because I can see how a guy like Kaprizov or like Connor McDavid, any of these other players who look and say, okay, the cap is going up significantly in the next few seasons. And not that you always want to be the highest paid guy, but you want to be close. As Nathan McKinnon said, you don't want the moniker, the best value contract in the NHL. So I can agree with them on that. But I think term, for a few reasons. A, what if the team isn't winning and I'm there for 8 years and now I'm into my late 30s? I lose on any chance to maybe find a competitive team. And then B, there's the AAV. Where do you come out? Is this more of a term thing or is this AAV?
I don't think so. And if you remember also on the rundown, I completely agree with you that if I were Kaprizov, I think that maybe a 3 or 4 year extension, which would, again, you're adding 1 year to that because he has 1 year left on his deal, is the sweet spot. So you're, not only allowing yourself to maximize more money on, as the cap continues to climb, but you're also putting a little pressure on the Wild to build a real contender around you. But as of now, he has given no indication to the Wild that is something that he wants, that it is, that he wants a long-term deal. The question is where. Is he trying to squeeze every penny out of the Wild? Their owner was for a year, he has been extremely public in the fact that nobody is going to pay him more money and nobody could give him more term than the Minnesota Wild. He doubled down on that a week and a half, 2 weeks ago when they had the unveiling for the newly named Grand Casino Arena here by saying the same thing, that this is going to be a groundbreaking contract. What was weird about what Craig Leopold, is that usually you make those type of comments, Jason, when you know that the deal is essentially done in a drawer and you're just working on structure or signing bonuses or whatever. They hadn't even made the formal presentation yet. I think there was just a lot of assumptions inside the Minnesota Wild organization that there's no way that a guy that missed 41 games last year, that is turning 29 when this extension kicks in, would turn down the highest paid contract in NHL history, both in terms of AAV and total dollars, that nobody in their right mind would turn down $128 million. Well, they left that meeting and turned it down. So now it's, where do you go from here? Are they, just because Craig went so public, did Paul Theophane say we are turning down everything because we can get them more and more money? Or does he at this point maybe look like somebody that wants to leave here? That's what we have to figure out. He is supposed to talk on Thursday, the first day of training camp. So we'll see what he has to say, if he fesses up to this, if he, is transparent in any manner, or if he just says no comment, no comment, no comment. The only thing I can tell you is, as of this moment, and anything can change with one phone call, and it's probably going to have to change with Kirill's side making the phone call, is I don't think the Wild are just going to automatically up their price. I don't think they're suddenly going to go 16.5, 16.7, 17, 17.5. I think that's negotiating against yourself. Right now, they have been given, from my sources, no indication, no direction on where Kirill wants to take this. So at some point, I think they're going to have to meet again. But as of right this moment, and again, that could change very quickly, nothing has changed since he initially turned down that deal early last week.
All right. And that it is interesting, because if you look currently today at pending UFAs, and I would say most of these guys, I don't think are going to make it to July 1st.
Right.
But Connor McDavid, Kirill Kaprizov, Jack Eichel, Kyle Connor, Artemi Panarin, Adrian Kempe, for fun, Alex Ovechkin. Like there's some pretty big name guys that are available. And the Panarin one, because we know that Russian players love playing in New York, the city, the lifestyle for Russians, they quite like it there. And we know that the Rangers have always been aggressive at players. If there was one team where I would say, hey, if Kaprizov's looking to go to, that might be the one, because it's the Big Apple, right? You look at the history of it, and in theory, they would have the money. Now, would they want both? Yes, they couldn't afford both, but they might look and say, hey, we'd probably take Kaprizov, who's younger, over Panarin for the next 5 years.
Yeah, which could get awkward because it's the same agent, right? Paul Theophane is the one that landed Panarin in the first place in the Big Apple. Panarin, if they were able to make this jigsaw puzzle last, Panarin would obviously have to take a haircut, a significant haircut, and probably Kirill doesn't get what he would get here on 16. So we'll see where it goes. I mean, right now, the Wild have not asked Kaprizov for a list. I don't know if it makes sense to do that. Like, to me, if I were Bill Guerin, I would have, if I was going to, before asking for a list, I would actually have conversations with teams that might be interested, whether it's Carolina New York, Chicago, LA. These are teams that I think would have interest in him and have those conversations. And then if there's ever something that I actually are interested in, then you maybe go to Kirill and say, all right, look, where are we here? Is this something you'd be interested in? A lot of Wild fans that are older, I've covered this team now this is my 21st season. They remember Marian Gaborik, and they don't want this to be Marian Gaborik 2.0. In 2008, in that offseason, he turned down a reported 10-year, $80 million deal. And 5 games into that season, playing sewer ball down in Fort Lauderdale, got hurt. And it was a disaster. He eventually had hip surgery that December. He became untradeable. Doug Riseborough was fired. Chuck Fletcher came on, and suddenly he went to Craig Leopold and wanted the contract offer back, and they said no, and they moved on from him. They lost him for nothing, and they wound up signing Marty Havlat as sort of a consolation prize. You can't lose Kirill Kaprizov for nothing. So he's got the hammer, though. The Wild, in the last year of his contract, gave him a full no move. So he really decides his fate here.
Yeah, no, it's a big story that won't go away, and I know you'll be all over it all year long. Now let's start our Metro division kind of preview. We talk about where they were last year, remind everybody, and then also what are some of the moves. We like to start from the bottom up in the standings last year. The Philadelphia Flyers, of course, were in the basement last year in that division with 76 points. And you look at their off seasons. Well, the number one, it's actually 3 new coaches in this division. One, of course, Rick Tocchet comes home to Philadelphia. Flyer fans love him. They love him now, but we'll see kind of how things go. If you lose, we know the Philly faithful aren't necessarily the most patient fan base in the league, but they didn't make a ton of moves. Obviously, the coach comes in. Trevor Zegras is going to be the big one. They got in Dan Vladar, Noah Juleson. That's kind of really it. They kept a lot of their same players. Ryan Poling's gone. They just moved Fedotov to Columbus. You look at the Flyers offseason, what they've done, like expecting much from them. Like, I don't have them as a team that's going to compete for a playoff spot. I think, Rick Tocchet's going to kind of have an open canvas to kind of see who he likes, who he doesn't like, and how they maneuver things.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, like, what's the real Flyers? Is it the one from 2 years ago that was extremely competitive, or is it the one last year? I think, it's going to be interesting to see Mitch Goff now, in year 2 and how he plays. This is a new lease on life with Trevor Zegras. Based on his history, I'm going to be really interested how that marriage goes between Rick Tocchet and him. He is a new school player. And it's just going to be really, it's going to be really fascinating to be coached by an old school guy. But there's a lot of motivation to try to make this work because, as we know, Trevor Zegras, if he is, right, is as good a player as there is. And so we'll see how he plays. I know he worked his butt off this summer. I mentioned that I went over to that apprentice camp in Stamford, Connecticut, and he had just been there and spent a lot of time there this offseason. So we'll see how he does. They get Christian Dvorak on a 1-year deal. Dvorak, again, I think he is what he is at this point in his career, but he could be a really good penalty killer. He's somebody that can pot in some goals. A good pro. So we'll see where it goes.
Like, they've got some guys. Not great news about Luchenko already. It sounds like he's not going to be ready to go in camp here. And with his speed, I think they thought he would be a guy who could be on the roster. But, Konechny's new deal kicks in this year. You got Couture, Owen Tippett, Zegras, Dvorak, Noah Cates. Then they got some physical guys who I think Tocchet will like, of course, in Hathaway and Delorier. It's really on the back end for them. Sanheim, obviously, he's an excellent defender. But then there's York, Ristolainen, and, Jamie Drysdale. He came on in the second half last year. He's in the final year of his deal, making $2.3 million. Him and Zegras, obviously, very close. So we'll kind of see what happens there on the back end. And then Dan Vladar, he's going to get the opportunity here, I think, to be a starter. And he's been a backup. He's never really been the starter. And, Philadelphia's goaltending last year was atrocious. Now, team defense was part of that, but their goaltending was just not very good. And so, they should get an improvement there automatically from Vladar.
Yeah, I think the first thing he's going to bring to that team is work ethic, because he's going to absolutely demand it. But to your point, I mean, to me, it's about goaltending. Like, they are a competitive team. They have a lot of really good players. But I sat down in Milan with Sam Urson, and he put a lot of pressure on himself to be a better goaltender, and he wants to push Vladar. And, and look, he's at an age where if he plays well and up to his capabilities, he can take that job. So I think that's what it comes down to, like, because even on their back end, I actually think they have pieces there that could be, really competitive in a very, very tough division. But they've got to get better goaltending, because I do think they are going to have the ability to score, especially if Mitch Goff is unleashed.
Well, I actually think the division's wide open, because outside of Carolina, like nobody even had, while Washington was very good in Carolina, but after that, like New Jersey had 91 points, just made it in. And I think they had lots of issues last year. Obviously, no Jack Hughes for a long stretch. That's a massive advantage for them. The other team that didn't make the playoffs in the same state of Pennsylvania, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I think there's lots of storylines around the Penguins. So number one, Dan Muse comes in as their new head coach. And, for a bottom team, they've made a lot of changes, which isn't surprising. Grzelcyk, man, he had 40 points last year, and he's still an unsigned, unrestricted free agent defenseman, which is a little surprising to me. But, they brought in
Matt PTO today.
Yeah. But for 40-point defenseman, and all he got was a PTO. So that was a little surprising. Yeah. But, Dumba, Alexiev are some back, Connor Clifton. So they got 3 new defenders, Tommy Novak. And I know he played 2 games, but he only played 2 games last year from Nashville. So I'll put him in the new category, really. Anthony Mantha, Brazo, Connor Dewar, who came in late. Like, they got a lot of guys because they made a lot of trades last year when they're out of it. Tristan Jarry, in a way, is coming back because, of course, he was in the minors last season. So there's tons of question marks. And, I know then you throw in the Crosby factor, and are they competitive? Like, I know I look at that Penguins lineup, Mike, and I know that division isn't that deep. And so you could challenge for a number 3 spot, but Tristan Jarry is going to have to be what he was 2 years ago for the starting right there for them to have any chance. And they're just going to have to play better team defense. And I'm not sure they're capable of it.
Yeah. I mean, they were minus 50 goal differential last year. I think that was worse in the conference. So, not very good. And I don't think they want to be very good. I think they're in the Gavin McKenna sweepstakes. But look, I mean, we learned this past year with the Islanders. You don't have to be the worst team in the league to win the lottery. So, you can't really tank in today's NHL anymore and be guaranteed of anything, be assured of anything. So, but they're not. They're a team that doesn't seem to be motivated to win, which is contradictory to what we know the mentality of and the DNA of Sidney Crosby. So I still think as much as he's tried to, put a lot of this scuttlebutt to bed, it's just not going to go anywhere if they continue to lose, especially, if we're assuming that this is Malkin's last year, that could be a motivating factor to keep Sid there. But once that ends, let's just say that Malkin is traded to a playoff team at the end of the year, look, if all bets are off. So it's just, I know that Penguins fans don't like this being a storyline, but it's just not going to go away if they don't win.
Man, I've been saying this for a year, and people are like, oh, he'll never leave. I'm like, trust me. He went to 4 nations, and he's like, oh, this is what winning feels like again. And now he's going to play on the Olympic team, and that's obviously going to be super competitive. It's the first time in 12 years that the NHL players have been at the Olympics, so that'll be a big deal. You're around all those guys, and this guy's won for Cup, and he's been here. And Sidney Crosby hasn't won a playoff series since 2017 when they won the Cup, right? Ovechkin beat them in 18, and that was kind of the end of it. They made the playoffs a few times, but they haven't won. And that's a long time to go without winning. I just think it's only a matter of time, unless the Penguins absolutely shock us. And now Crosby had a very good year, but here's the thing. Crosby had a great year last year, Mike, and you mentioned they were minus 38 5-on-5, right? They got outscored. They had 157 goals 5-on-5. They gave up 195. Only Chicago, San Jose, and Nashville allowed more goals 5-on-5. So they weren't good. And I haven't seen that much of a change unless it's all in coaching, but unless, like, is Mike Sullivan suddenly that bad of a coach? Like, I don't know. So I don't have a lot of faith that the Penguins can get in the playoffs this year.
Especially because they don't seem to want to. Obviously the players are different than management, but it seems like and look, I think we could all admit, but dating back to Mario to Sid, this franchise has a history of trying to lose at times when they think that they are not good enough or could go get that blue chipper. I think what's interesting about Sid is how sort of the narrative changed. I think we all just assumed he was going to be earmarked eventually for Colorado. he wants to play with McKinnon. They're buddies. They got to spend time together at the Worlds and the Four Nations. And now it seems like Montreal is the team. He was a Montreal fan. He got to be there during the Four Nations at Bell Center with everybody chanting his name. They obviously have the pieces that could eventually make it happen as well. His dad was drafted there, so it sort of has shifted on where he could eventually go to. It's pretty funny.
No, it's true. And now, does Montreal fill in that really competitive box?
Yeah.
I'm not sure yet. I
think they are on their way up, though.
They're on their way up, but and obviously they made the big Noah Dobson trade, which leads us to our next team, the New York Islanders, who, again, an off season, they got rid of Noah Dobson, so that's a pretty big subtraction. But maybe Matt Schaefer's ready as an 18-year-old rookie, but they didn't bring really any other significant defensemen into the mix. They did bring in Jonathan Drouin, Shabanov, the young Russian player. A lot of people think, maybe he can make an impact on that team. But, the Islanders have kind of been the same team now for many years. Obviously, Noah Dobson's a big change. But other than that, they got a really good goaltender. Can they score? That's going to be the question. So, and the Islanders, I remember when they went to back-to-back conference finals, that was 5 years ago, but it's like the organization still is like, hey, you know what? We can get back there. And I don't know. I'm not sure. On paper, they got some pieces where I look and say, can compete with the Rangers in New Jersey? I think they could. So I think they'll be there. I'm just not sure if they'll end up actually getting it.
Yeah, I think a lot of this season really depends on Matthew Barzal. And, he played 30 games last year. He feels healthy. We sat down with him in Vegas last week, and he is really motivated to get back to that player. I mean, it was only 2 years ago that he had 80 points, which was a career high. So, you get Horvat and Barzal. The one thing about the Islanders is that they just seem to be this plodding team. There's foot speed issues. They just don't seem to be extremely fast. So can some of their young blood, can a Matthew Schaefer, who is dynamic with the puck, add to that enthusiasm? I know that they absolutely love him already there. They bring in Drouin. Obviously, Matthew Darche is going to be really, really analyzing everything that he sees with Patrick Waugh and trying to make those significant changes. I do think they had a pretty good offseason. I think that there's players that could take another step, guys like Simon Holmstrom. I'll be interested to see how the Anders Lee situation sort of transpires. It seems like they're not talking to him about another deal right now, and he's obviously their captain. And this is an organization that just moved on from Brock Nelson and things like that. So first year without Lou, we'll see how it goes.
And then, of course, there is Cal Ritchie, who they, I think that was a great trade for the New York Islanders. And I wonder, would you be better off let the kid get his feet wet a little bit in the American League? 85% of the league plays in the American League at some point in their career. So I wouldn't, Islander fans, I don't think you can't rush all your young guys to the NHL, right? The NHL is just, if you want to be a competitive team, like if Matthew Schaefer makes your team, he only played 17 games last year of major junior. I think he makes the team out of camp, Mike. I'm curious if he plays all season long, right? Like we might see them do what other teams have done where you kind of waste a year of his ELC, but you send him back to junior. Maybe he goes to the World Juniors. You kind of see how he's playing, but he only played 17 games last year in major junior. Maybe he's ready. He's an unbelievable kid. He's obviously, losing his mother at a young age. You can tell that he's had to mature more than what his birth certificate says. And I understand all that, but the NHL game is very challenging for teenagers. I've said it many times. I don't think it's a teenage league. So, there's the odd guy that can do it, but it's extremely rare.
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw that with Matt Dumba here years and years and years ago. Teams are not I think more in the media, we make a big deal of oh, you hit that 10-game mark, they're keeping them. And I don't think teams really, it's about the free agent clock with teams. I don't think teams really worry about, you burn the first year of an ELC. Actually, sometimes it helps you out, right? Because then
because now he doesn't, he has less runway to get a bigger contract.
Absolutely. So I agree with you. The one thing that I got to chat with Matthew Darche a little bit when we were in Milan. It was just by happenstance that he happened to be at the same hotel. He was ending a family vacation there. And he's a very, especially after working in, with the Lightning for a long time. I mean, he is a very smart, wise guy, and he's going to do the best for development of any of those players.
And we move up then to the New York Rangers. Mike Sullivan moves around the division, goes from long time in Pittsburgh, where he won multiple cups. Now he's coaching the Rangers. They announced JT Miller will be their new captain. All right, some significant changes there. Not only the coach, K'Andre Miller is out. Chris Kreider is out. They bring in, obviously, Scott Morrow, who they got in that trade. Gavrikov from LA is their big UFA signing. Taylor Radish, another guy. Gabe Perreault, I know he's there, but, young guys like that who haven't played much, I put him as kind of a new guy. And maybe Connor Sheary, who's on a PTO. I look at the Rangers, and to me, the big question is going to be, can Adam Fox bounce back? Because by his standards, he had a meh type of season last year for the Rangers. And with Sullivan coming in, there's lots of new stuff. I think the Rangers are poised to get right back in the playoffs in that division.
I agree with you. I mean, I think Shesterkin is going to be much, much better. I like their team. I think that they, clearly their target was Gavrikov. They got him. I think that, it's a shame the way that things ended with Chris Kreider, third most goals in Rangers history, and has one so-so year, major injuries, and he's sort of out, pushed out. But I think Mike Sullivan is the key there. Clearly there's an expiration date sometimes with lobby. And I think Mike comes in there and he's going to hold guys accountable. At the orientation camp in Plymouth about 3 weeks ago, I sat down with him to talk about the Olympic team. And I asked about Adam Fox, who does not have a secure roster spot right now for the Olympics based on his Four Nations play. And Mike basically said that, look, by his standards, that was not a Norris type year last year, and that he's going to do everything in his power as a coach to put Adam in the best position to succeed and get back to that standard that I know that Adam Fox believes that he can play with. He's obviously still a young guy. He's got to bounce back. They add Scott Morrow. He's somebody that was really a bright young kid for the Carolina Hurricanes. He was thrown into the playoffs, put in a real tough spot. Obviously, he's thrown into the K'Andre Miller trade. So I just think that the Rangers are going to be a better team, just based on Mike being there, based on the real quality talent that team still has. I think Will Cooley is going to make a step. We'll see how Lafreniere does. And look, Zibanejad's another player that's just got to be better. And I think that he's, Sully flew out to Sweden to meet with him this offseason as well. So I just think that they are just going to get that sort of coaching bump that we often see with new teams.
And honestly, I think of the four divisions to start the year, the Metro looks like the one that has, the weakest top to bottom competition level because they don't have as many of the top end teams as some of those other divisions maybe. And that allows, now the Rangers might get back to that team because, they were a perennial 100-point team here for many years prior to last season. So that they in itself could make it better. The Devils blue line stays healthy. Jack Hughes is healthy. They're probably a way better team. And so that's why I definitely think there's room for the Rangers to jump back up and get into a playoff spot. So that puts us halfway through, which means it's time now to bring in Pat Puff as we do another edition of Fill in the Blank. Pat, how you doing, my man?
Great. Yourself?
Pretty good.
Yeah, I'm excited. The first one, I guess, for me, this is Fill in the Blank. It is a segment brought to you by Bet365. Whichever your bet is, it's never ordinary. Bet365, download the app, get into the game, use the code NATION. Bet365 must be 19 or older. Please play responsibly. I've got kind of an easy one to start and then two that might test you. So last year, the Washington Capitals were the only team to finish with 100 points. So blank teams in the Metro will end this season with 100 points. Reminder, the Hurricanes were just one short.
Yeah, I'd go Hurricanes right off the hop.
So you're taking
two?
one?
Oh yeah. I thought you just wanted somebody that didn't make it. Yeah, I would go two.
It's a good question. We saw the last year was the fewest 100-point teams we've had in quite some time, which makes it harder for the trend. You guys know the trend in the NHL for the last 4 seasons. At least 3 100-point teams from the previous year missed the playoffs. There's only 9 100-point teams last year, so for 3 of them to miss would be pretty difficult. But there are some candidates, so I'm going to say I will go with. I think it's 2 as well that will have 100 points in the Metro.
Okay, so we're leaving out the New York Rangers, I'm assuming, which is actually...
I think the Capitals actually going to take a step back this year. I think they'll be a playoff team, but I could see them at around the 98, 99 point range.
So you think the Rangers would be one of the 2?
Yeah, I think the Rangers actually have a big bounce back season.
Okay, speaking of the Rangers, if not JT Miller, blank would have been a great captain for the Rangers. Tough one.
You want to go first? I mean, the first one that popped in my head was Panarin, but in the last year of his deal, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
No. Yeah, it's a good question. Like Adam Fox, I'm not sure he has the personality though of, he's kind of a quieter guy. Not that not everybody has to be boisterous, but that's actually a really good question. If it wasn't going to be JT Miller, I'm going to get, if it wasn't JT Miller, I think they would have been captainless this season.
I like that answer. And then another tough one for you. Kind of touched on it a little bit, but if not Montreal or Colorado, and ignoring all the rumors, where would you like to see Sidney Crosby land if he was willing to take a trade?
Minnesota.
It's a little biased.
I know. Well, I'd love to cover Sidney. They got Bill Guerin here. They got Marc-Andre Fleury. It makes all the sense in the world, right?
Fair enough.
Where would I want to see Crosby? I'd want to see him on a team that had a chance to compete, number one. And I'm not sold that like Montreal can be a playoff team. Yes. I'm not sold that they're like a legit top 8 team. So I think actually just for the storyline, Crosby in Toronto would be unbelievable, right? To see how he would do it, how they would treat him in Toronto, how it'd be like just for the sheer storyline and the outside chaos, I would be interested in that.
Yeah, it would be interesting. And then maybe there would be less talk about McDavid going there.
Well, that'll never stop until McDavid signs a contract extension, right?
That's
and even
true.
if he signs an extension, the Leaf, but he's going to come on his next contract. So
that's fair. All right, that's Fill in the Blank, brought to you by Bet365. I'll let you guys get back to it.
Yeah, that's an interesting question on, because I agree with you, Mike, that there's all the Montreal stuff now, but I think it all changes at time. Not a lot of people thought Rantanen was going to go to Carolina when he did, right? Yep. So you never know. It comes down to, obviously Sidney Crosby would have a huge say in it, but I think there'd be lots of teams. Like you look at the players at the Four Nations on Team Canada who are stars, who are then stars on NHL teams. And you'd look and say, hey, Sid, do you want to come play here? Well, this is what we got here, because it would only be for 2 years. It could be for longer, right? But he has 2 years left on his deal. So it'd be this coming year and then the following one. And you know what, do you think Connor McDavid would make a pitch? Probably. I think now the Florida Panthers, I'm not sure if they can even do it because they've signed everybody, but Brad Marchand and Reinhart and those guys would be making a pitch. Colorado, obviously, with Nathan McKinnon would be doing one. And there's, the Tampa Bay Lightning, Braden Point might say, hey, we still got some pretty good pieces out here in Tampa Bay, Kucherov and Hedman and Vasilevsky. So there would be no shortage of teams that would have interest in Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, absolutely. But to your point, he's going to decide, and everybody's going to be making pitches to him. It's just a matter of where Sidney would if he's going to uproot himself and leave a place that he's incredibly loyal to. It's going to have to be somewhere pretty special. It's not just going to be anywhere. No. Even if he thinks that team's a Stanley Cup contender, I think it's going to have to tug at his heartstrings a little bit. What do you think is going to happen with Connor? By the way, I mean, is this not getting done before the season?
Yeah, I always thought it was going to get done in September. I was saying that for a year. I didn't think it was a big deal. Now it's kind of like, it might stretch out a little bit longer here. I still ultimately think he will re-sign in Edmonton, but as I've said, I think it's a short-term deal. I don't think it's going to be a long-term. It doesn't make any financial sense for him in the salary cap era. And even in your organization, you know what? He's got 1 year left. Does he sign for 3? That gives him 4 years. Gives him time to say, hey, you know what? Draisaitl and myself, we're still in our prime. Let's rock and roll. Let's see what the organization does. So I think that's kind of ultimately what I think happens. But at this stage, if it doesn't happen by the start of the season, then I don't think there's any rush for McDavid's camp. I know, as he said, hey, will he get asked about in other markets? Sure. And the Oilers are actually on the road a ton early on in the season. So, and out east, did you know all 16 of their Eastern road trip games are done by December, which is very rare. So he'll be in like Toronto and New York and all the markets that would really want him. So he'll get asked about it for sure. I think if he doesn't sign by October, I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't happen until January, February, to be honest.
Yeah, that means they're not going to be used to going all the way to Florida for the third straight year in June. They're going to be just road weary when that happens.
Well, they actually have 10,000 less kilometers in travel this year because
Wow.
they're making all of their East trips in 3 trips. Sometimes they do 4 or 5. So if you're a believer that the fatigue factor is cumulative, it should be, in theory, maybe a hard first 3 months, but definitely they should be more rested than they have been. In theory, we'll see if it works or not. But I still think ultimately he'll get done. Just like I think Eichel stays in Vegas. Listening to you off the top, I was like, oh, I think for sure. And then I listened to you, I'm like, oh, geez, maybe Kaprizov won't stay in Mini, but because you're pretty tapped in. I thought for sure at the end of it he'd stay there, but you never know. I think
maybe Kelly McCrimmon's slow playing Eichel to just kind of pay attention what's going on with Connor.
Yeah, maybe.
Who knows?
Yeah. That's true.
That's why if I'm Eichel, I'm like, hey, let's get this done now. Like, you know.
Well, Eichel's a pretty good player there in Vegas, right? So I think,
and Kelly will tell you, just what adding that number 1 center has done to that organization.
That was the reason they won, 100%.
100%. Yeah.
Now, the top 4 teams in the Metro last year, this team didn't make the playoffs. They had the season that I think a lot of fans, they were like their second favorite team. They were just emotionally rooting for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Everyone knows what happened to start the season last year with the unfortunate pass of Johnny Gaudreau and his brother. And the Columbus Blue Jackets, man, they were gritty. They scratched and clawed, and they were right there. But ultimately, they came up short. But, man, they didn't lose a lot. They got a lot of good young players. Marchenko, Valenkov coming up. They did add Charlie Coyle and Miles Wood, Isaac Lundstrom. Now they get Eric Branson back on their back end. And I think he only played, 12 games or something. So he will help. And the guys that they lost, guys like James Van Riemsdyk, Sean Corrali, Kevin LeBanc, Jack Johnson. So I look at Columbus and, man, they had a lot of things go right. Werenski had an unreal year. He could have, he was fantastic. But Columbus, they got young guys that they can score, Mike. And I think the Columbus Blue Jackets are going to be right in the mix. And I'll be curious if they try to make a push at the deadline to get into the postseason. I think that's an organization who would just like to get back to the dance.
Well, they have one of the most aggressive GMs in the league in Dan Vladar. He's not going to stand pat. He's going to try to, do what he can to absolutely help this organization. Incredibly fiery, competitive coach in Dean Evison. And they're a team that was right there last year. We were talking to Nick Suzuki at the Vegas media tour just about what it would have been if they had a play-in type scenario, and Montreal and Columbus wound up there at the end of the day. Columbus came extremely close to making the playoffs. It would have been an incredible storyline. I think Charlie Coyle will help. He is a Dean Evison type player. From a work ethic standpoint, he's never been the scorer that I think a lot of people thought when he was drafted, I think 28th overall by San Jose, wound up making his NHL debut here in Minnesota after the Brent Burns trade with the Sharks. And, but he's had a really good career, and I think he's going to go there and be a leader and try, what I loved about Coyle is here's a guy that wound up on Boston, his dream scenario. He goes and gets traded to Colorado, and then suddenly he's shocked with his acquisition in Columbus, but he was right away excited and made that extremely clear to Blue Jackets fans. He's just such a pro and a good guy. So I think he is absolutely going to help there. But I still think that if like you and I think the Rangers are going to be much better, I think the Islanders are going to be better. I think the Flyers are going to be better. I think that puts a lot of pressure on the Blue Jackets. And so I still don't know if I see them being a playoff team.
Yeah, they're going to be in tough, especially, the Rangers bounce back. So then you look and say, are you going to beat out the 4th place team in the Atlantic, or can you beat out Washington, Carolina, or New Jersey? That's kind of what it comes down to. So they'll be in tough, but I think Columbus is going to be competitive. They're a team I'm rooting for. I know they just acquired Fedotov. It's more so, it sounds like, for number 3, according to Aaron Portzline. But I'll be watching the Elvis Merzlikins story in Columbus this year to kind of see, can he get back on track a little bit from where they thought he'd be? Because if they can get better goaltending, Mike, nobody scored more goals in the Columbus Blue Jackets 5-on-5, man. They were the best scoring team in the NHL 5-on-5 last year, which probably surprises a lot of people, being like, what are you talking about? But they're the only team, and not by a little. They had 201 goals 5-on-5. Next closest was Washington at 190. It wasn't, you look at guys, even they had 20 more goals 5-on-5 than everybody except Vegas, Buffalo, Tampa, and Washington. So they can score if they can lower their goals against. They should, that'll allow them to be competitive.
Yeah, and that was, by the way, Dean Evason's MO here. The Wild were a really good 5-on-5 team under him. It was special teams that were, the issue, which has been the bane of existence here the last 4 or 5 years in Minnesota.
So now we move to the Devils. 91 points, made the playoffs, finished third in their division, lost in the opening round to the Carolina Hurricanes. And the Devils, the big one is, health of Jack Hughes. Of course, that injury was big for them last year. They bring in Dodanoff, Connor Brown, Kalen Addison, Dumoulin's gone, Tatar's gone, Nathan Bastian is gone. There is the Luke Hughes contract that we're waiting on. So that's, I guess, like the one big thing here heading into camp for the New Jersey Devils, because history tells us, Mike, the longer you wait and you miss training camp, you miss preseason, yeah, you'll get signed. But like, look at Nylander when he did it, Swayman last year when they did it. There's not many guys who, if you miss training camp in the preseason and come in late, who have a good year. Like, this is an important year for Luke Hughes, and I think they got to get down to brass tactics here and get a deal done.
Yeah, and I would assume they will, but especially to your point, when you're 22 years old, right? I mean, he needs to be in camp. I know that talking to Jack the other day, I mean, Jack thinks that he could go there and be their number one power play guy, which I don't know if Dougie Hamilton would agree with. But I think that they're a team that should be much, much better. I know that, look, the one thing, talking to Nico Hischier in Milan, is that he was really, really proud that this team didn't put its tail between its legs and just said, that's our season, when Jack went down after being upended in that accident with Jack Hughes right after the Four Nations. Jack Eichel right after the Four Nations. So, I know it was a devastating injury for Jack Hughes, but yet the Devils rallied together and made the playoffs. But I know that it is time. Like, look, their window is far from closed when you have as many good players as they do. But at some point, you have to start to show that this team is, especially after what happened, a couple of years ago and beating the Rangers in the playoffs. I think you want to show that you're going to continue to take appreciable steps. So I think if you just kind of wipe out last year's ending and say, look, they played well in the playoffs, they weren't able to advance, but like here's a team that didn't have their number one, center there in Hughes in the playoffs. I think that you just wipe that out and say, all right, we're coming in with this fresh slate. But I do think that you got to get Luke Hughes, locked and loaded here.
Well, and a few storylines for Devils for me to watch this year is where their young defensemen, where are they all going to play, right? You got Simone Nemec, you got Luke Hughes, you got Seamus as well, that, because you have Hamilton and Pesce and Dillon and Kovacevic. Like, they got a lot of depth on the back end, and Siegenthaler. Like, I could see a trade coming from New Jersey here. They just got too many good defensemen. It's a crazy thing to say. And you know what? I know the young guys could stay in the minors, but some of them are like, hey, I think I'm NHL ready. Then there's the Nico Dawes. Does he get through waivers? Got Markstrom and Jake Allen. Would he get through waivers? Man, I'm not sure. Mike, I've heard some rumblings of teams looking for a guy they could get him. And then a rare thing you don't see very often, but right now, Kevin Rooney and Luke Glendening both come in on PTOs, and they're kind of battling maybe for that fourth line center spot, both on PTOs, and one of them might win it and actually get a contract out of it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so, look, the one thing about the Devils is that they've got a lot of players, and they're going to have to figure out what to do with. But to me, Tom Fitzgerald, that puts them in a real position of power when you have as many good D as they have. So there's going to be teams out there that are not really excited about some of the things that they see in training camp. There are going to be injuries and things like that. So I think there's still chance of player movement. Obviously, Luke Hughes still has got to get signed, and when he does that creates even a further logjam. So I definitely think that there's going to be some potential maneuvering here that we're going to see Fitzy do here in the next month.
And that leaves us with the Carolina Hurricanes. Another solid season by the Hurricanes, but really now the big addition for them, Keandre Miller, Nikolai Ehlers comes in. They also, now Nikishin played in the playoffs for them. I think he played 4 or 5 games, but they're pretty high on him as a young defender because Brent Burns, Orloff gone, Scott Morrow gone in the trade. Also, Jack Roslovic, there's another guy that's kind of interesting. People thought he'd have a contract. He didn't have a contract, scored 20 goals last year. So we'll see what happens to him. Doesn't sound like it's going to Carolina, but you never know with the Hurricanes. I look at the Hurricanes, you bring in Nikolai Ehlers, who's fast, and man, when he's healthy, he's pretty good. The problem is he can get banged up a little bit. And man, I love what they tried last year to get Mikko Rantanen, and they got him, and then they didn't want to stay, unfortunately. But for me, the same storyline for the Hurricanes. really good team, lots of depth, don't have a superstar.
For now.
Yeah.
And I say that sort of tongue in cheek. They are the one team that I think is extremely motivated to try to get Kirill Kaprizov there and would be willing to pay him too. So if Kirill is motivated by money and a team that has a chance to win and for the foreseeable future, they're a team that the Minnesota Wild might talk trade with. And look, the one thing I'll say, and I don't want to put the cart before the horse here, is that the guys the Wild might want there probably have some no move protection. I'm thinking of guys like Aho, but one person that doesn't is Svechnikov. So he's not Kaprizov, but that could be somebody that maybe there's a little marriage there if you start a little package.
And he's got 4 years left, I think, on his contract. So because if you're Minnesota and you trade a guy like Kaprizov, which obviously they don't want to, but if you end up having to do it, you at least want to get some good players back in return that you're not just going to lose in a year.
100%. And again, Svech is not Kaprizov, but it gives you a starting point and some sort of trade. And again, somebody that doesn't have any protection, at least in the next couple of years on his deal. But to get to the reason why we're talking about the Hurricanes is, look, they're one of the best teams in the league, but they're still trying to get to that point where they can, one, beat Florida in the playoffs, but two, get to that promised land and go back and try to win their first Stanley Cup since 2006. And sorry to bring that up, Edmonton fans. They are a really quality team. They get great coaching. I think they improved this offseason. Nikolai Ehlers is somebody that's been sort of, rumored to go there for years. And I personally think that Keandre Miller could be a much, much better player than he showed last season in New York. 100% addition by subtraction from what I saw from Dmitry Orlov in the playoffs. I mean, he was just a gift that kept on giving, especially in that Florida series. It was truly unreal, the mistakes that he was making and the turnovers and out of position and things like that. So it just needed to change. So I love their team. The other thing that I'm going to be interested in is, look, the one thing that Eric Tulsky has been rumored to be after for a long, long time that still hasn't been addressed yet is goaltending. Now, look, Freddie and Kochetkov, a lot of teams could do worse with that. But look, I mean, there's somebody that I think has talked to Carter Hart. I tend to hear that Carter's coming out west somewhere. Probably I think there's a couple teams really west that he's interested in. But if Carolina has talked to Hart, it just shows that at some point that Eric might want to maybe even upgrade his goaltending a little further than Freddie and Kochetkov.
Now, when you say really west, are you talking Anaheim? But they got Dostal.
No, I think that he'd want to win. I think Vegas, Utah, those are those teams that probably make a lot of sense if he's going to go somewhere.
Interesting. You and I think, are on the same page. We think the Carolina Hurricanes are a playoff team, barring some, they would have to have a string of significant injuries to not make the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. They're always going to be right there in the regular season. The question is, it takes a lot of patience to go play those 82 games again, knowing that at the end of the day, you're probably going to have to play Florida. So I think the goal always is going to be, how can we go and beat that team and what can they do to try to get over that hump? And that's why I think that Eric Tulsky, if he tried to trade for Rantanen last year, and look, he got a great consolation prize in Logan Stankoven. And then, I thought he did a fabulous job in that Dallas trade, getting the first and things like that. But I just think that means that anybody that's available, that's a big ticket item this year, that Tulsky is going to be after at some point. So I just don't think that this Carolina roster that we see right now, that's very, very good, is going to be the finished product that we see on March 6th.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. I think they need ideally a big game breaker, but I also think they need a little bit of size and physicality spread out throughout their lineup a little bit. They got some guys, they play hard. Don't get me wrong, but size is the name of the game in the play, especially against Florida. You need a few guys who like to go and play dirty, Mike, just to be bluntly honest. That's the Panthers. They got skill and they got dirt, and it's a good combination together. And that leaves us with the Washington Capitals at an unreal season last year. Alex Ovechkin has his new cereal that's launched, Ovi's Great Crunch, if you missed it. But all of that's going, it's victory over cancer. It's going to raise awareness and funds for pediatric cancer research for all of our Capitals fans. They'll be probably having Ovi's Great Crunch. It celebrates his the Grade 8 goal chase for him. He's obviously going to get to 900 goals this year, so to be the first ever player over 900. But like they had an unreal year last year, and that chase was something that I talked to players. Like it was just like, God, you wanted to be part of it. And it was electric, and it made the game fun. And it kind of took out the stress of anything else. You weren't even thinking about it. It was just fun. And they had lots of guys play well on their team. Not a lot of changes. They're like Mangiapane and Radish are out. Ehlers, you bring in more so guys just from inside, right? Like Sonny Milano was hurt, didn't play. Ryan Leonard, who they signed late in the year, but he's there all season long. Ethan Frank, who played late in the year, he's there all year long. Young Justin Sourdif, who they got from Florida in an offseason move. So they've really replaced some older guys with some young blood in that team. I think they had everything go right for them last year. I love, though, it didn't get talked about enough, their new offensive system that they played, kind of the triangle offense by their head, by their head coach, who I thought was very deserving of winning the Jack Adams. And I look at kind of to see, have teams figured that out, and can Protas and all these guys continue on down the path that they had last year, like Strome, Protas, they all had really good seasons. Dubois kind of came back to what he is, which didn't surprise me, but like, I like their mixture of size and skill there. And now you bring in Leonard and Frank. I think they add a little bit of speed as well.
I totally agree with you. Like I put, like, I know it's fashionable Demidov right now, but I put Ryan Leonard, Snuggerud, Perrick. I think these guys are going to be right there for the Calder at the end of the day. Especially Leonard. I mean, he's just such a fabulous player. The boost that the Capitals got last year, I don't think that we could really, I don't want to take it for granted. But I do think that this team is still a really, really good team. But they did have this artificial thing that they were chasing last year that no doubt buoyed them along. I talked to a lot of players from Dubois in Vegas to Rasmus Sandin in Milan about just what that was like. Now, obviously, 900 is the next goal, but knowing Ovi, he might do that opening night, right? I mean, he's 3 away. So,
yeah.
I mean, look, I don't put that past him at all. But I think Dylan Strome has really come into his own, just has been a perfect fit there. They got both their goalies back, willing to re-sign and be part of that tandem there in Lindgren and Thompson. So they're just a really quality team, which shocks me because I don't think a lot of us really looked at them with a lot of adulation going into last season. And, we were all Nashville. And the next thing you know, Washington is just, battling for the President's Trophy all year long. So I think that they're going to be, I still put Carolina probably as, I agree with you. I think that Washington's probably, they're not going to get 111 points again. I think Carolina is going to probably push them at the end of the day. But Washington, to me, is an absolute playoff team, no doubt.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly. How many goals do you think Ovi scores this year?
Probably. I mean, I put in the 40s.
Really?
I really do. I think that I think that he's still going to be as motivated as ever. Especially if that account executive was right, and this is it. I don't think it is, but I still think that as long as he's healthy, that he's still going to absolutely score goals. And even last year when he broke his fibula, again, Rasmus Sandin, when I was in Milan, told me that night in Utah, he asked, how long are you going to be out? And he goes, I'll be back on the ice in a couple of weeks. And next thing you know, 2 weeks later, as we all know, he was out there for a little twirl and got himself back faster than anybody could have imagined. So I don't put anything past Ovi.
Yeah, well, now that because you think about it, he had 44 goals in 65 games, right? Yeah. Leon Draisaitl was the only player in the league to score 50 last year, right? Goal scoring from the top guy, the league overall was down slightly, but it was really the top players that we saw the reduction across the league from top guys in goals. And so I hope that trend doesn't continue. I love to see guys chase 50 goals. I think it's a iconic number and I hope to see it. And man, Ovi, if he could even somehow even chase for 50, it'd be wild, but you're right. If you have 44 and 65, that puts him on pace for 50. Now I know there's not that chase, but I'm with you. If he has a good year, he might stick around and say, you know what? I might chase 1,000 here. If I play 3 years, I could score 103 goals in 3 seasons. That's do the math, 34 goals a year, right? Absolutely. I would rule it out.
And if they have a good year, there's going to be a lot of motivation for him because, look, he wants to win another cup, and they are a good hockey team. I still think they probably could do maybe one upgrade on their blue line. But I still like them from top to bottom. I think they have a really, when I mean, your third line right now is, I think, Ryan Leonard on it with Lapierre and Beauvillier. I mean, I think that they are a really, quality team. And as long as guys don't take a step back and they have injury issues, I think there's a lot there that's going to keep Ovi motivated this season and maybe beyond.
Well, there is one other one. If you want to look at most total goals in NHL history, Wayne Gretzky has 1,016. Ovi's currently at 974 regular season and playoffs. So that would be 42. So if you're looking for a motivation, that could be it. And he's like, hey, I score 43 goals. Now, no one can say I'm not the greatest goal scorer. Not that I think most people agree he is, but that's just a number. And I know the best of the best are always challenging themselves. So that's a number to watch for sure. Mikey, will be thanks as always for joining us on the rundown. We'll be catching up with you throughout the year, of course. And also anytime we'll be watching anything on Kaprizov, because I know if there's any story on it, you'll be number one on it. So I recommend everyone follow Mike's stuff at The Athletic, also online. And while you're there, be sure to pass him some fashion tips. He says he wants them, so that would be good.
Yeah, thanks,
awesome stuff. Thanks, Mikey. That's the rundown brought to you by Bet365.